and I love Wireshark and I love Fiddler. So this is basically going to be a mostly introduction to Wireshark. There will be a little bit of advanced concepts in there. It's not going to be too much, a little bit louder.
Yeah, a little louder.
It's not going to be too much like, we're not going to go into like art poisoning or anything like that. We're not going to do any attacks, but this kind of knowledge is going to give you information on just what Wireshark can do. So the two tools, Wireshark, live capture and analysis, deep inspection of protocols. It can go pretty inside anything that runs on a network. If it's popular, chances are Wireshark can decode it and find out more information than you ever wanted to know about something. It's really handy. It's cross-platform, works on many different devices. It's built into a lot of routers or something that can export to a format that Wireshark can understand. And Fiddler is a web session manipulation tool. I use it a lot at work to find out if I'm at a website and it's running slow. Why is it running slow? Is it running slow all the time? If I make the request more than once, is it slow every odd request? You can manipulate packets inside of the Fiddler interface just by clicking around, and you can replay them. And you can also tell it to automatically replay. So if you have a client application that somebody has written and it goes off to the server and it retrieves some data, you can tamper with that data and actually have the client receive something different back. This is good for QA testing to find like out of bounds vulnerabilities. Or if you have a really bad application that somebody wrote that asks the server, am I authenticated? And it says yes, you can replay that to the clients and they'll actually accept it. It's really fun when that happens. So Wireshark, it's open source. It's a suite of tools. It comes with things like T-Shark, which is a command line tool that you can run headless, so it doesn't have a GUI interface. It can also trail traffic, so you can hook it up to a particular wireless interface or an Ethernet interface and see the traffic real time coming in at you. You can even use it to monitor traffic over Bluetooth or USB. So if you're pairing with a phone and you want to see what kind of traffic's being sent between the two, you can actually look at the packets going between the two devices. And it's based around a packet capture library called libpcap and also I think it's a WinPcap. It's one of the other libraries. Depending on which operating system you have, sometimes there'll be more features. In Unix-based operating systems, you can actually monitor wireless traffic easier than you can in Windows. With Windows, you need a special driver for a special network card. That allows you to do some pretty nasty stuff. Definitely recommend it if you're bored. So the first time I had used Wireshark was back in the summer of 2001. I had taken home a computer from school. It was an SGI Indie. And this beautiful little blue pizza box had the wrong IP address written on it, the root password, nobody knew it. The guy who took care of it had like left the school 3 years ago. And it was a really nice piece of equipment that originally was supposed to be video editing software. If you're familiar with the N64, they actually used modified indies to do the 3D rendering on the initial games. They're pretty cool. So this thing's been sitting in our school back room, powered on. It's headless because the monitor doesn't work anymore. And I was like, can I take it home for the summer? Sure. So I took it home, and first thing I tried was to hook it up to my router. It's not getting an IP address. All right, I'll hook my computer up to it. Maybe it'll give me an IP address. No, that's not happening. So at the time, I had read an article about Ethereal, and I was like, well, I have a Unix machine. Let's give it a try. So I ran it. And with the crossover cable connected to the computer, I started seeing IP information come in. So I found out what the machine's IP address was, and I changed my IP address to a machine on the same subnet. I telnetted into it. I could see that it was asking me for a username and password. It's IRIX. If anybody remembers IRIX in the late 90s, oh gosh, you had some good times. So I just went on a random website, got an exploit, and I just had root access. That's how easy it was with IRIX. If you did not patch your telnet D, you were in. There were like 5 CTEs within like 3 years. And of course this thing hadn't been patched in years. It was just great. So I created myself another account, I tried to get the X window system opening, and it would never work for me. I couldn't figure out why, even to this day. Until last night, I was Googling and I found out this machine was the lower end version that didn't have any of the cool 3D rendering software on it. It was strictly sold just as a network appliance. So that was my first introduction to packet capture. It was really cool. I learned a lot about the TCP protocol just because you're seeing all this information stream across your window and you have no idea what it means. So you go down those rabbit holes. So, introduction to Wireshark. What else can it do? It has a powerful filter bar. That's kind of an understatement. This little bar at the top there, you can really type in almost anything and you'll find it. If you want to look for ARP traffic, which is what I would have done had I had a computer that was able to show the packets in real time. Mine back then couldn't. If I wanted to see if there were any DHCP servers sending up bootp requests, I could mark that down to look for bootp.option.type53, which is the DHCP discover message. So you could filter traffic looking for specifics. If you're looking for, let's say you have something on the network that's sending traffic, you can use this frame contains function. So in my example, I'm looking for something that contains ca.yahoo.com. It's what I use in almost all of my examples. Nobody uses Yahoo anymore. So if you ever do packet capturing, it's always there if you go to Yahoo. Nobody else is using Yahoo. There's no toolbars anymore. It's great. So this shows me that there are frames that are containing ca.yahoo.com. You could look for data like Windows. You could look for data like SMB. Anything that you're looking for. If it's an iPhone, you can look for ip.hostname contains, and you can look for anything going to apple.com. Configurable columns. This is probably one of my most used features of Wireshark, because when you're trying to find out what's going on in a particular conversation, you have all these possible values to choose from. So right here, there's an example of this this red line, and I've clicked on it, and it has an RST and ACK. And if I want to know what other packets have these particular flags, by default, Wireshark isn't going to show you that information, because why would it? There's so many other things to choose from. So you can just right-click on that flags and choose Apply as Column, and now it'll show up as a column in your list. And you can filter through looking for any irregularities or any other types of patterns that you're looking for. So these are my custom columns. They're pretty self-explanatory. There's only a couple that don't make any sense. Time and relative time. If you don't change the displayed type, they'll just be the same value. But sometimes they'll have it time since capture, and sometimes they'll have it actual time of day. So when you have somebody say, there was a weird blip on the network at 1:51 p.m., you can find out where 1:51 p.m. is, and you can find that that's 33 seconds into your capture, and now you can find out anything in that 5-second period where there might have been network traffic being dropped, or some new traffic going on the network asking for IP addresses, ARP commands saying, hey, I'm actually going to be this MAC address, and it's like, no, you can't. So there's a lot of custom ones down there, like TCP flags. I have the time delta, which is the time between the previous frame. This is good for anything that slows down. If you have a network problem where you're clicking on a website and all of a sudden it's slow, and the server guys are telling you 100% it's not them, maybe you have a TCP congestion window problem. Maybe you have a wireless problem. But this will tell you if the packet received from the previous stream had been delayed. And if it's not, chances are it's a network or not a network problem. Sequent numbers, you can use these if you want. They get really confusing, and you generally need to have like a pen and paper going on saying that 52 acknowledged 63 and 63 is acknowledging 54, and then why is 54 down here, 52 is up here. There's actually an example of that later on. It's a lot of fun. TCP window sizes, this is my favorite thing. In virtualization, the networks are so fast, and generally what happens is if you're seeing a non-constant average connection speed. So you're going to a website, you're going to a server, and it's always 10 milliseconds, 10 milliseconds, 10 milliseconds. And all of a sudden it's 120 milliseconds. And it doesn't make any sense. There's nothing in the back end that's saying that it's taking this long, and unless you actually look at the packets, you might see that the window size has actually got filled. So you're streaming all this data, so maybe your ELK cluster, or maybe your SQL server has like all the RAM and processor in the world, but its TCP receive window isn't big enough. That calculated window size will show you if the network is just not able to receive any data. So that's one of my favorite things to turn on. It's also how you can figure out if you need to upgrade your networking equipment, or if you need to use that 40 gigabit Ethernet interface you have in Azure and you realize it's just not enough because the software that's processing the data is too slow. So columns are really fun. Color-coded highlights. This is probably one of the more advanced features of Wireshark that can really bite you in the bum. This is why I have this red line right there. There are 4 colors that really stick out. We have the red, we have the yellow, we have these lavender colors, which are really soothing, but that red, well. So Wireshark by default comes with a really good set of highlighting, and the only one I've ever added in the last 5 years is this sin green one. I actually found it a couple days ago, just researching some stuff, and it makes looking at the Wireshark trace more pleasant because you have all this green, and it's just acknowledging the packets. Like it's nice, it's good, it's better than all that black and the red that you'll usually see in a trace. Because chances are, if you're looking at a trace, there's a good reason. Details about packets. So red is telling us that a TCP reset has occurred. We can find out if that's a good thing. If you're ending a connection to a remote host, you're sending a reset if you've received data after the finalizing connection. It's something that happens all the time. TCP, you'll get data in unordered fashion. It's just the life of it. So in Wireshark, you can click in the actual room and follow the TCP stream. You'll see there's other options there. If this was a UDP stream, you could do that. Later on, we'll show an HTTP stream following that traffic. And it'll show you the actual conversation. This is a SSL connection, and it's negotiating some kind of thing. I can't read real bot, but I know there's data between 2 hosts. We have the red, which is me, the blue, which is them. Data's going back and forth. That's great. So this looks like a normal conversation. It's short and concise. It's probably that initial HTTPS connect. I'm almost positive of it. So looking here, we have the stream of packets, and you can see that they're kind of normal. There's not a lot of them. A little razor pointer. This is me. It's my laptop. This is some random capture I had when I was in Mexico. I'm probably talking to the access points authentication page or something like that. And it's really short. The duration is probably 200 milliseconds. That's about the average for a request from me to a web server. And I can see there's some unordered packets. So this big scary red thing just means that I hung up on the host and it acknowledged my hang up afterwards. It's pretty much all it is. It's nothing nefarious. It's nothing I'd be concerned about, but it does show up in this big scary red blank bar. So the flags, as I mentioned earlier, you can apply these flags as columns. The only problem with that is it's in hex, and then you have to know that 0004 is RST. But what if it's an RST and a SYN or an RST and ACT? So you have to have this whole table there. Unfortunately, lazy people write things on the internet, and somebody goes and writes a Lua filter for this. So it actually will convert that ugly hex value to something that's human readable. So using this awesome dissector, you can just copy it over to your Wireshark plugins folder. And it's just a text file too. If you wanted to modify this to be something different, you could. And you can restart Wireshark, go to that stream you had open, and now your TCP flags will be human readable. So you have these, they call it the snort style TCP flag list. It's really easy to understand once you look at it. Rather than those hex values, we can see immediately that we have a handshake, we have acknowledging, we have some, the P is for send immediately, for push. And then we get that AR, and then the R, and then that's, like with this on there, immediately I was like, well, why are these numbers here, and why are those duplicated? And so it just helps make things a lot easier. So Wireshark, out of the box, is really useful. It's really handy, and there's so many things you can do with it. And if it does something, or if it doesn't do something really good, chances are you can write a program for it that'll do all that data filtering for you. So going on to mate, you'll see on the previous screen here, there's this column down there. This is my go-to configuration for Wireshark. If you've ever had to diagnose any kind of connection failures, firewall problems, random applications blocking traffic, this will pretty much narrow it down, usually in the first 10 minutes. Like if you've used Mate, you've found out all the problems in the world ever. It's that powerful, and I'll kind of explain why. So Mate is a meta-analysis tracing engine, and all you have to do to enable it is copy a Mate configuration file, which contains a couple of fields for the protocols you're interested in, which is generally TCP. And it groups packets together, so any kind of data packet that's specific to the protocol, it'll group them in the conversation. So if you have an HTTP connection or an HTTPS connection, it groups those together. FTP, ICMP, anything that's a conversation group. And you can find out this conversation, how long did it last? It lasts 30 seconds. How many packets were transmitted between them? So if you have a conversation that lasted, let's say, 121 seconds, and there were 6 packets or 8 packets sent between it, you're automatically going to assume that's some kind of timeout, because the TCP window is going to be like, okay, haven't heard anything after 60 seconds, I'm going to try again, and it's going to be sending keep alive packets, and it's never going to get a response. So after about 120 seconds, it times out, and then you realize, oh crap, the gateway doesn't have the firewall rule open, and that's why this isn't working. So you can easily do that instead of going through 50,000 packets or just looking for your specific gateway. You can look for groups of packets that are not actually talking to anything. So they're making connections, they're asking for data in return, and nothing's coming back. So that's the power of Mate. And there's an example right down there in the session timer, mate.tcp sesh time greater than 1. Those are sessions that last longer than a second. You can reverse that less than a second. Mate.tcp sesh numbers of PDUs less than 5, because a TCP handshake is generally like, hey, 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 data. Anything less than 4 PDUs, it's probably going to be a connection that actually didn't get anywhere, or it was just a really, really short amount of data. That's probably not going to be what you're looking for. Generally, in this world, we're sending out bytes and bytes and bytes of data. So combining those two together, you can actually look for retransmissions with number of PDUs less than 4. This will group together any connections that both have a reset, any PDUs less than 4, which means any data connection or any data package less than 4, and then also any retransmissions. So this rate immediately will tell you if you have if you're reaching out to something and it's not responding, it's going to show up right there. So if you, let's say you hit a host too hard and it's not responding to you anymore, you can see that in your packet capture. It's really, really handy. I used this back in November. We had accidentally installed an antivirus program on one of our SQL servers, and it started to deny connections to our local admin boxes. Opening up the Wireshark trace, it was just immediately apparent that the traffic was being blocked. It was really handy. And then you have that to show to Microsoft, who's like, well, we didn't put the antivirus there. And it's like, oh, I guess we did. So we removed the antivirus and that fixed it. So this is a sample mate file. It's more than you'll ever need, really. If you're this deep into ICMP traffic troubleshooting, mate's going to be really easy, but how many ICMP packets do you have in your capture? You probably don't have like hundreds of thousands, and if you do, this is where it's going to be helpful. It's a pretty easy language to understand. It's just extract address from IP.address, extract port from, so you can extract certain columns from the flags and the protocols, and then it groups them together. The whole protocol for mate is well documented on the website. I've never had to vary from this configuration. I can't wait until I do, when there's going to be a time where I'm going to have to look for a really obscure mate protocol file and just get to use it. But other than that, these defaults pretty much work great. The actual packet bytes. So the main part about Wireshark is you capture traffic on the wire. You're capturing Ethernet traffic, you're capturing wire traffic, traffic that you might not have access to. This is a Shark tap. So there's 3 ports on this, laptop here, your wall there, and then your capture device goes into here. So this splits the traffic up. Nobody really knows that it's being sent to another host. It's pretty awesome. But what are you going to do with that data? That's the important part. So when you capture this data, you have the actual bytes of the data being transferred over the network available to you. So this is me searching for Yahoo. I'm on my laptop, and I see all this data here. And it's not really that useful to me because I know I'm going to the website, yahoo.com, my browser's downloading a bunch of information, but all I see is this hex stuff, and that's not useful. So, in the good old days, if we were troubleshooting a problem on a web server or a client, we could just take the SSL certificate installed on that web server, and we could load it up into Wireshark, and it would just magically decrypt everything as long as you had that handshake. It's not as easy nowadays. You can still trick your machines into doing that. You can, if you have control of the machine, you can pretty much ask it to do anything. I set a group policy saying, hey, only use this invalid certificate, and most web servers will respond with, all right, I'll do that, it's okay, it's your data, we don't really care. But the easiest way is to use the SSL keylog file, which isn't a standard, but it's supported by a lot of different browsers and a lot of different libraries. So by setting this environment variable, you can do it in Windows and you can do it in Unix as well. It will tell any of those libraries that's aware of this particular environmental variable to write your pre-master secrets out to this file. So if you have curl, depending on which version you have, you might have to compile it manually with this flag to accept it. If you're using Chrome or Firefox, it will just natively work, which is pretty handy, as long as it's within the last, I think, year and a half. And things like Spotify, which use, it's either Atom or Electron, whatever web engine it uses also accepts this file out of that. So when you have Spotify open, it'll start writing the secret keys to that file, and then you can later use that to decrypt them. Because the web is so advanced nowadays, a lot of these websites you'll use will actually be using HTTP2, and it'll be a mixture of HTTP and HTTP2 traffic. So if you're trying to decrypt HTTP traffic, make it easy on yourself and disable HTTP2 in your browser. The reason for that is you're going to be having a stream that's going to be HTTP2, which is, it could pretty much have multiple streams in it, and it makes following the traffic really hard. So if you downgrade it to one, it just makes your life easier. It also completely changes the traffic. So if you're trying to, I don't know, capture and replay traffic against HTTP2 because you're testing that protocol, or you're trying to break into a specific HTTP2 host, you probably don't want to go to HTTP traffic. But if you're just looking for the data that's being transferred between them, like the JSON or the HTML files, that'll be fine. Another thing is websites, they won't always use the same IP address. So if you go to ca.yahoo.com, it actually has like 5 different IP addresses it'll resolve to. So in that session, you could have 5 different versions of ca.yahoo.com, which makes things incredibly annoying for recorded demos. So what I did is I added a host entry so that ca.yahoo.com always resolved to that IP address. Now, of course, this means that I'm always hitting that IP address, which will change everything. So you can't expect it to always be there. You can't expect that server to always be the same server. You're changing the environment. Not good for troubleshooting, but great for understanding what this host is doing. Wireshark has a lot of other advanced methods on their Wireshark wiki under SSL. They go into some pretty good detail, and there's some great Stack Overflow links of using the LD library preload to use a DLL that writes out these secrets automatically, which is pretty cool. Not so much fun for production, but it's just an example of adding an environment variable. If you use the user profile environment variable in Windows, it actually keeps the username, even though it's not the username. It's kind of nice, so it kind of resolves it for you. It's just handy.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
That means you cannot decrypt the full text. Yeah, you decrypt. You just get a feeling of the pattern of the traffic. Yeah?
It depends on how much control you have over the computer. If you are using this Shark tab, and it's this laptop and that laptop, I won't be able to see the traffic on his computer unless I also get that pre-master shared secrets key. So you have to have some kind of control over that. So if you're on your phone and you're able to turn on that feature, then you can capture the traffic from your phone, and most likely you'll be able to decrypt it. But you have to have that pre-master shared key file, and you also have to have the connection request where it exchanges the keys. So sometimes, in the example I'll show you, you can, but it all does depend. So this is a sample interface for capturing data. One of the most important things to do is start Wireshark first, start capturing first, and then open whatever program you're trying to capture the network traffic from, even if that involves plugging in a cable or something. So this is an example of running Chrome with disabling HTTP2, and I'm trying to connect to ca.yahoo.com. And of course, the gray thing highlighted is my Wi-Fi interface. So once the web page is loaded, make sure Chrome has quit. Sometimes Chrome will run in the background and it'll actually keep things open. It's like the worst thing to do when you're trying to get a capture working and you can't. Just make sure everything is closed. When I do the capture, I save it as a specific file, and I'll also take a copy of the SSL key file and name it usually the same thing as the capture, so that they're side by side. So 6 months down the road, you don't have this 10 megabyte key file when it's really just a 4 kilobyte key file. This will kill your Wireshark when you open that file up. If I have a 10 meg file and a 1 meg key file, it takes about 2 minutes to open. It's pretty crazy. So keep it small, keep it relevant. I'll usually delete the SSL key file from my global directory after I've done a particular capture. So reassembling is really easy with this method. All you have to do is you point to that key file, you can see here I have a C Media Meetups Wireshark folder, captures Yahoo SSL all.pms. That's my pre-shared master keys file for secrets. That's really all you have to do to enable decryption for SSL. As long as you have captured those secrets, you can decrypt the traffic on the client side. If I had a capture from the server side, that wouldn't work the other way. You'd have to get one from them as well. And chances are it's gone through a couple different layers, so it's going to be a different packet list as well. So this is loaded up. I have the IP address, which we know is yahoo.com because I put that in my host file. And I can see there's a client hello, there's a server hello, there's a key exchange, which is exactly what we want. Anytime you're using that, so client hello, server hello, certificate, server key exchange, and then here's the client hello, key exchange, and then here's the get. So this is the initial request to yahoo.com. Hi.
Really good question.
Yeah.
In terms of the handshake negotiation there,
Yeah.
if they were like a custom protocol, or sorry, custom Cypress suite that wasn't defined yet, are there like ways to write plugins to keep this going?
Yes. There's actually an amazing video from last year's Wireshark conference. I believe it's the original developer of Wireshark. He basically in the hour, he goes through part one of writing your own custom dissector, and then he does it in 3 different languages. He does it in Lua, he does it in that other thing I never remember the name of, and then he does it in C. And he shows the difference between the 3. And just watching it, I wanted to start writing my own protocol decoder because it looked so much fun.
Did I get that?
Yeah, I can send it to you.
Thank you very much.
That was really cool. And the speed difference too, like it was like 12 seconds for a 10 gigabyte file versus 120 seconds versus like hours or something. Just the different methods you could use to decode. So yeah, that's this is a decoded HTTP session, and we can actually export this file because I know I want the traffic between me and this host, and I'm going to be sharing this file with other people. If I have this filter enabled, it's just the traffic between me and them, so I'm going to export it. And exporting this packet allows us to put it in a state where we have the key exchanges, which is important because you can't just filter for the HTTP traffic. When you export this, you need those key exchanges. And I could send this to somebody knowing that even though I have my web bank or web mail or web banking open in another tab, they're not going to get that information because it's just the data going to that host. So file, export specified packets. We want all the displayed packets because that's our display filter. And then we got the key exchange and we're good. So once we have this, we're going to open up the filtered file, and now the packets in this file are only related to that conversation. So if we were trying to look at maybe an ad click that isn't yahoo.com, it's not going to be in this file. We're assuming that what we're looking for is just on ca.yahoo.com. It makes the process a little easier. It's very not real life. Generally, you'll have a bunch of hosts in there. But we're looking specifically at this for the purpose of this demonstration. You can see what kind of objects get returned by going to File, Export Objects, HTTP. This will allow you to export any CSS files, JavaScript files, any JSON requests, any XML requests. It allows you to dump all of the traffic you receive from that capture into actual files, because maybe you want to grep through them, maybe you want to prepare a man-in-the-middle attack where you're going to replay one of these files to the host, and maybe you just want to see what's going on. If there's any personal data it's exposing to those ad agencies or to anything else. So you can also extract these resources in bulk using a bunch of different tools. You'll notice that there's file names there that have some characters that are not going to be very friendly on disk. So when you actually go to save all, it'll just try to write them and it'll fail. If you go to save each one individually, you can rename them to something that'll work on disk. Or if you really want them that bad, there's many different tools you can use that will allow you to extract things from like 100 gigabyte transfer megabytes. So the HTTP stream function, because we've asked our browser to only use HTTP1, and because we've gone to just one host, I can follow the entire HTTP session by right-clicking on it, where the get HTTP1 is up there in the corner, and go to follow, and then instead of TCP stream, we can go to HTTP stream. Now this is showing the encrypted text in the HTTPS session. So previously this was just a bunch of unreadable hex garbage. Now that we've had the pre-master secrets exposed, we can decrypt that data, and now we see an actual conversation. It's pretty chatty. It's just saying, hey, give me that page. This is my cookie. That's my cookie. You could go there as me and Yahoo if you want right now. It's pretty cool. And then that's all it is. It's 3 conversations, really quick, and you can see the unencrypted text. The status window. That's it, the bottom. It tells you how many packets are captured, and if you have a display filter, how many are displayed. Wow. Really, it's really, really useful. When you have a packet, you have a display filter going, and it shows you 0 packets, and you're wondering why, or throwing 3 packets, you kind of get a little suspicious that maybe the display filter I chose is wrong, and maybe it isn't, because if you're looking for a specific IP address in there, and it's not showing up, or it's only showing up 3 times and it should be there more, what are you missing? So the absence of values is actually really handy. That's kind of why I put the host entry for that specific IP address for Yahoo, because it flips between a 192 and a 72 address, and that's just way too complicated. It makes trying to do a trace or trying to show something useful really hard. The easy mode button. This is my favorite addition to Wireshark, and it's pretty much the first thing I will do when I open up a capture file that I know nothing about. This easy mode button down here, right now it's a lovely little yellow, which means there aren't any warnings in the packet, which is a lie. So unrecognized text, ignored, unknown record. Connection reset's just a warning, so that's why it's a yellow. It tells you how many there are, 99. This is the Kitchener Public Library. So I had just logged on to the Kitchener Public Library. I hadn't clicked the approve yet. So my computer's just trying to talk to a bunch of stuff. My Slack's trying to connect. My web browser that's open is trying to connect with stuff. So it can't, because the library has that. You must agree to this first before I let the traffic out. So everything's just flipping out here, and you can see that there's some out of order frames because it's wireless. I'm trying to get some DNS, and DNS isn't responding. Some TCP0 window segments. I don't know why. But this is just a garbage collection file just to see what's going on. A lot of connection finished, connection established. It's pretty cool. A lot of M searches, so these are probably like MDNS for Apple devices right here. They're broadcasting who they are. It's pretty neat. This one is was at a resort last week in Mexico, and I found a place that had the worst Wi-Fi ever. So what I did was I got a really good capture, and then I moved my laptop. It was like right under the bar or something, and I got a really crappy capture. So you can see that we have a lot of retransmissions. There's a lot of retransmissions. Windows completely full for some reason. That's probably why the Wi-Fi wasn't working at the time. It's a lot of information that, out of context, will make absolutely no sense, but the easy button automatically summarizes what the whole capture says to you. So this says to me that I don't have a good connection, and there's other people, because there's 72 MDNS requests, there's other people on the network, so it's most likely a gateway problem, because there's people talking to each other, and I'm seeing a lot of requests that people are making, but nothing's going outside of that. So it's a good guess that the gateway was just overloaded.
Is it legal to analyze traffic?
It's a good question. It's a really good question. So the slide I don't have here is me on the airplane on the way home, and Air Canada has this Rouge player, and it wasn't working. And I'm like, why isn't it working? So I fire up my Wireshark capture, and it basically seen exactly this. Is I could see everybody else on the network. I could see their iPhones. I could see their Androids. The MDNS is the rendezvous protocol. It's basically, hi, I'm this computer. Anybody else out there? So you could find out basically if the network's active that way. So we knew the network was working, and the flight attendants were saying that they had to restart some server. So the traffic that I could see is it was going out to some Air Canada website, and that was timing out. So from what I could tell is the network was working. The Air Canada network that it was trying to connect to outside of the plane wasn't responding. That was my best guess, and it was kind of fun. At the same time, I'm capturing this traffic, and the person next to me is just like looking at my screen, and she goes back to her book, and I'm like, I wonder what she thinks. And, it was probably the dumbest thing I've ever done on a plane. So yeah, that's why I use T-Shark. Do it headless. But I don't think capturing traffic's good. I/O graphs are really handy. I can spend hours in them trying to justify something. Right now at work, I am looking into a problem where our TCP receive window is it's not working right on a particular version of Linux, and I'm trying to get the data to support that. The unfortunate part is it only happens under high load, so I have all this traffic that I'm trying to capture, and because I'm capturing traffic on the system, now I'm introducing a problem where I'm taking up resources that should be used to serve the traffic, which is why this TTAP is really good for physical hardware, but for virtual hardware is not really anything in Azure I can use to fix that. So I have to try to take little tiny samples to see if it is the receive window just being too high. And what I would do in the I/O graph is I would take any one of those display filters, apply it to the display filter part right here, and then I could make an aggregate based on that. So if I'm looking for the window size, I can find the min window size and the max window size over the duration, and I can also pair that with an average request count. So if we have a lot of HTTP traffic coming in, I can see that the more HTTP traffic coming in, which is the max or average bytes with the window received, you should be able to see it like peak up and down. And that's what I'm hoping to find, but I can't get a good enough capture. If it's an easy problem like not having a gigabyte of traffic going through, it's a lot easier to get this kind of data. When it is just a large amount of traffic, you tend to do like 100 millisecond captures or 1 second captures here and there, just to get little samples and try to find it. This one is used to guess for TCP connections that were failure to connect particulars. Yeah, so this is me looking for any times where the networks went down. So looking at this screen right here, this is the duration in seconds. So between 200 and 240, there were a bunch of blips. So in my network capture file, I could expect there to be a lot of retransmissions during that time, and most likely the network had dropped. So this is good to find out any kind of patterns you're looking for at a high level. Right now that is set to 4, I believe. You could also set this to 30, so you could look at groups of packets with less than 30 packets over time. Sorry, groups of packets with less than 30 packets. It just doesn't sound right, but it's true. And you can find long-running problems. So if there's a particular device that comes on the network every once in a while and doesn't, or it's trying to ping something that doesn't exist, you could find this in the traffic by looking at the pattern from a whole point of view, which is really neat. Conversations is another, this is how we used to do the easy button mode. So you have a capture, you have Ethernet traffic, you have IP version 4 and 6 traffic, you have your TCP layer, your UDP layer, and this tells you how many conversations there have been. So immediately what I do is I sort from this one right here, from B to A. This means how many packets did B, the server, send back to me. If B hasn't sent back any packets to me, so it's 0, chances are I can't connect to them. So this particular trace, this is the network down. I'm trying to get to Google user content, Google Analytics, Google APIs, Google. Most likely I just opened up Chrome. And the top there, yeah, that's me connecting to some computer. So all of those traffic responses, they never got anything back. It'll tell you the duration. So some of these tried for, looks like a little bit of a second here. I'll play the duration. And yeah, there we go. So 9 seconds, 1 second. So the network was down, and that's my justification. The network was down is everything's 0. You generally don't want 0 because you're asking for data. It's not responding to you. Why isn't it responding to you? Either down, firewall, antivirus blocking your traffic, or for some reason you just don't have a route to them, which doesn't make sense because it's Google. So capturing traffic on all ends. If you're trying to figure out an issue with the network, or you're trying to analyze a protocol, like you want to figure out how Pokemon Go talks to the servers, you need to get the data from as many places as you can. You're not going to get the traffic from the Pokemon Go server as much as you'd like that. So if you have access to a web server that you're trying to analyze, you have access to the client server, and you're trying to see if there's, what happens if you send bad data back to the client or back to the server. The easiest way to do that, which I'll show you in Fiddler, is just by loading the software up. Otherwise, you'll need a traffic capture from the web server and a traffic capture from the client, and generally anything in between. So if you have a proxy server, that's like one of the best places to get a capture from. If you have like an F5 appliance, you're paying a ridiculous amount of money because they have so many good features built in, and you can capture that data out if it's a physical one, probably to a mirroring port. If not, you have some good software appliance tools that'll put it on the stored hard drive locally. And then you can actually ask it to put the pre-secret keys with that trace, or it automatically decrypts it too. They're pretty cool with what they can do. I don't get to work with that kind of hardware too often, but when you do, it just makes life easy. You don't have to jump through all these hoops. So manning the middle on the server, you want your gateway to be encrypted on both ends. If you're using SSL or TLS between you and the server, can you ask it not to? That's a thing. Depending on if you're in a dev environment or if you're able to just take one of the servers offline, you can ask it to use a more insecure version. And there are preferences where if the client asks the server for to use an insecure certificate, chances are it'll let you. So those are the ways to do that. That's Wireshark in a nutshell. It's a very powerful tool that you can do a lot with. It's also incredibly dangerous. People say don't run Wireshark as root. The reason for that is the people who wrote those dissectors wrote them in C, buffer overflows galore, and it's not been proven, but people could easily craft packets to overrun your computer, and then as you're looking for something to some nefarious thing on the network is looking for you, and then automatically you can run the software as you. So don't run Wireshark as root. It really yells at you. And Windows, don't run it as an administrator unless the interfaces aren't capturing. Then you open it as an administrator, you close it immediately because it interfaces with the capture protocols immediately. Questions about Wireshark? Go ahead.
Have you used Wireshark in scenarios with like Google gRPC or Protobuf?
No, I have not.
Do you know if Wireshark does support?
Yes.
Protocol?
I'm pretty sure it does. The Wireshark conference from last year, there's a talk on that. Almost positive. All their talks
like,
are online.
in general terms, like, does it just kind of like look at the encoding of what protobuf would use, and then, or would you be able to would you have to write a custom dissector for your own particular protobuf?
If it's the one I'm thinking of, there might be an open source one available that's not included in the default library. If it's not, there's probably somebody out there who has done it. Or it's using one of the other major capture programs, and like not Wireshark specifically, but something else. Yeah, not offhand. Anybody got anything else?
For the man in the middle on the server, can I do like SSL split and sniff the SSL traffic?
It depends how much access you have on the server. If you have any sort of root access on the server, you can just use the LD preload library trick, and you can hook directly in to those layers. So anytime the SSL library is used, it just writes the secrets out. As for SSL split, not sure 100%. Hi.
I thought that there was a problem trying to use Wireshark on Wi-Fi.
There is.
Is that all fixed now?
It depends on what operating system you run, on what Wi-Fi cards you have. The easiest way is to get those, I think it's called an Air Saran card, like $600. They come with a special driver. There's 2 radios in it, and they allow you to do monitoring mode. And they pretty much work on every Windows laptop. In the Linux world, I'm pretty sure those standard, they weren't Dell, but they might have been Dell. There was a Wi-Fi chipset that was really popular, that worked really well, and this was a couple years ago, back when the web craze and the Cane Enable thing was a really popular thing to do in cafes. So if you pay for it, it's going to work. Otherwise, you're at the mercy of what hardware you have.
And then also, how much is one of those that's splitting at?
$49, but it's a 10100. So if you're doing anything with high bandwidth, it's not too useful. Yeah. These, you get them on Amazon pretty quick, pretty cheap.
Or would it downgrade the speed?
Yeah, I know it'll downgrade it. So if you're trying to capture something that's over a gigabit network, chances are you don't want to use this anyways. You want like a device. Like if you are doing that full gigabit speed. But if you're not, then yeah, it'll just downgrade it to under. And chances are you'll be able to capture what you need. It's pretty handy. I would use it to going to like government sites where the network's bad, but the applications are even worse. This allows you to prove that it was the application and not the network, because you're not running a capture program on an already underpowered desktop that might be like an i3 with like a gig of RAM or something. So it's just not feasible to run Wireshark on there. And then asking IT to run a split on their router, it's just like, no, we're not doing that. So you plop this down in front of them, you walk in, you get your data, you walk out, service ticket's closed, and they're no longer trying to upgrade the network. So yeah, it's handy.
How is the documentation for coming? They have like how do I, or can you find easy on the web?
I think I've not been able to find something yet. I've looked for some pretty obscure issues where I've seen a packet show up, and I've just Googled that particular thing, and everybody's done all this before because there's nothing new. It's TCP, it's protocols. Everybody's done this all 1,000 times. My example from the beginning of just looking for ARP traffic, I think I found 3 different ways to do that without Wireshark now, but the documentation is so good everywhere. Their manuals are really good with covering both Unix and Windows oddities as well. Hi.
So it does understand TLS 1.3 then?
Should. I can't say for sure. Yeah. But to figure that out, what you would do is you would just allow only that protocol in like a group policy if it was Windows or your SSL library, and then you'd be able to see 100% in the negotiation after if it did.
How does Wireshark do with protocols that target IoT devices?
Hmm.
Like CoAP, Zigbee?
I don't know offhand, but I imagine as long as it uses something on the wire, it's going to be good. And I'm thinking right now in my Twitter feed, there's probably someone I'm going to ask about that because it seems like a really neat option. What kind of IoT devices are you looking at?
Oh, just anything like from smart switches,
Yeah.
lights, that kind of stuff.
I got one of those plugs that turn on and off automatically, and you program it by your phone. And I've been wanting to figure out just how vulnerable it is, which is the same thing with the Bluetooth ones. Where you've seen the ones where you walk close to the door locks and they automatically unlock. There's a bunch of tutorials online where they've used Wireshark to dissect the protocol. Anything that's been talking between the two devices, or when it calls home, and you find out that it just uses its default password to call home. I was working on an exploit with the Logitech mouse where on the Windows it phones home for its manifest file, and for a while it wasn't actually checking the contents that were getting returned. So you could man in the middle with like Fiddler and put your own application in there, and then as long as you have the right certificate, it wasn't validating it. And then they fixed that, I think, last year. So now it's validating against their certificate. So then you'd have to change it. Then you already have access to the host. Anything else? Hi.
I found a tool called TCP View, and that, I guess, is Microsoft's little thing. One of the things that has that's amazing that I'm not sure is in Wireshark, or I don't know how to enable it or make it work. It can tell me what application is generating the traffic.
So Microsoft's Network Packet Analyzer is also really good for that. So on Windows, I sometimes will default to the Microsoft one. Out of familiarity, I'll open up Wireshark, but it will tell you what application sent what traffic, and you can actually group it on the left and filter by there, and it does a lot more human-readable decoding of the packets as well. So TCP View is cool. It's good for just a nice, quick program that you can install and see what's going on. But the Microsoft Network Packet Analyzer suite, I think it's Message Analyzer now, is a little better for that.
But, I mean, the point is, it's not even going to be possible for Wireshark to do this thing.
It is. There's a plugin that you can install in Wireshark that's in beta that you can find out the process of what sent the traffic. Yeah. It's just, it's not a, I guess it's not a priority, but it is available.
That would only be available if you're running on the same machine, right?
Yes.
You cannot spook on other traffic and figure out the process.
No, but I mean, often it's like when I've needed to use these tools, something is generating an enormous amount of traffic. What is it on this machine that's generating an enormous amount of traffic?
Yeah, it'll narrow it down to the process
It's
ID.
just TCP coming in.
Yeah. Yeah, there is a plugin for it. I never use it. I usually just open up the Microsoft version of it, which is pretty cool. Anything else?